Part 1. My name is David, and for the longest time, I believed I was living the perfect life. I had a stunning wife, Jennifer, who turned heads wherever she went. We had been married for nearly a decade, building a relationship filled with love, laughter, and adventure. Life had given us everything we could ever dream of: exotic vacations, a luxurious home in an upscale neighborhood, and the kind of financial security most people only fantasized about. Jennifer and I traveled often, spending weeks in lavish resorts on tropical islands, sipping expensive cocktails while watching the sunset over the ocean. Our hotel suites were always the best, top floors with breathtaking views, infinity pools that melted into the horizon. We dined in the finest restaurants, tasting flavors from every corner of the world, relishing in the experience of being utterly and completely in love. Our social life was just as thrilling. We hosted extravagant parties in our home, surrounded by friends who admired us as the couple who had it all. People envied Jennifer, her beauty, her elegance, her infectious charm. And they respected me, the successful entrepreneur who had made it all possible. We laughed at the thought of growing old together, promising to never let life become mundane. I adored Jennifer beyond words, and she always reassured me that I was her one and only. When I looked at her, I saw my entire world in her eyes. Life was an adventure, and we embraced every moment. Weekends were filled with spontaneous getaways, road trips to the mountains, or cozy nights in front of the fireplace, wrapped in each other's arms. We shared everything: our dreams, our fears, our victories. It felt like nothing could touch us, like we had found the secret to happiness. Our home was a reflection of our love. Every detail had been chosen together, from the elegant chandeliers to the warm, inviting furniture. Jennifer had an eye for design, turning every space into a masterpiece of comfort and style. She made our house a home, a sanctuary where we could escape from the rest of the world and just be us. Every morning, I woke up beside the woman I loved, grateful for the life we had built. I would watch her sleep, the early sunlight casting a golden glow on her face, and I would wonder how I had gotten so lucky. She was my best friend, my partner in everything, the love of my life. We spent summers in Europe, cruising along the Amalfi Coast, drinking wine in small Italian villages, and walking hand in hand along the Seine in Paris. Winters were spent in Aspen, skiing down powdery slopes before warming up by the fire with a glass of whiskey. Our anniversaries were celebrated in the most extravagant ways: private yacht trips, helicopter rides over breathtaking landscapes, candlelit dinners on secluded beaches. We spared no expense when it came to making memories together. Jennifer was more than just my wife. She was my adventure partner, my confidant, the woman who knew me better than I knew myself. She had a way of making every moment feel special, whether it was a grand vacation or a simple night in with takeout and a classic movie. Her laughter was infectious, her presence intoxicating. She could light up a room just by walking into it, and I felt like the luckiest man in the world to be the one she chose. The people in our lives admired us, some even envied us. Friends would often tell me how lucky I was, and I would simply smile, knowing they were right. Colleagues at work would ask me what my secret was, how I had managed to land such a perfect marriage, and I would tell them it was simple: love, trust, and a willingness to experience life to the fullest. Jennifer and I were inseparable, and I couldn't imagine a future without her. Even on ordinary days, life felt extraordinary. We would wake up to the sound of the ocean waves crashing against the shore, sip coffee on our balcony overlooking the water, and plan out our next adventure. Sometimes, it was as simple as going for a drive with no destination in mind, letting the road take us wherever it pleased. Other times, it was boarding a flight on a whim, chasing the thrill of the unknown. That was the kind of life we had: spontaneous, exciting, full of love. Our love story felt like something out of a movie, the kind that people dream about but never actually get to live. And yet, here we were, living it. We had built something beautiful, something unbreakable. In my heart, I truly believed that nothing could ever change that. Life was perfect, and I never imagined it could be any other way. Part 2. At first, it was little things. Small, almost imperceptible changes that I brushed off as nothing more than the natural ebb and flow of life. Jennifer was always a vibrant woman, full of energy and excitement. But suddenly, she seemed distant. It was subtle at first. She would be on her phone more often, staring at the screen with a faint smile, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. When I asked her who she was texting, she would chuckle and say, "Just the girls," before quickly locking her phone and setting it aside. I didn't think much of it. After all, Jennifer had always been close with her friends. But then, she started coming home later than usual. Work is just crazy right now, she said one evening, dropping her purse on the counter before heading straight to the shower. Jennifer worked in event planning, and there were times when her schedule became overwhelming. I had seen her pull 14-hour days before, stress practically radiating off her as she juggled demanding clients and last-minute changes. But this felt different. She wasn't stressed. In fact, she seemed almost happy about it. She started missing our dinners, something we had always made a priority no matter how busy life got. I would wait at the table, the candles flickering, 2 plates of food growing cold. "Sorry, babe," she would text. "Got caught up at work. Don't wait up. Love you." At first, I accepted it. But as the weeks went on, the pattern became undeniable. The woman who used to count down the minutes until she could come home to me now seemed to avoid it. I tried convincing myself I was imagining things. But the more I watched, the more obvious it became. Weekends, once filled with spontaneous trips and lazy mornings in bed, became strangely occupied. "Brunch with the girls," she would say, or, "I promised my coworker I'd help with something." Even on the night she was home, she felt absent. We would sit together on the couch, but she was miles away, scrolling through her phone, barely responding when I spoke. When I reached for her, she would give me a quick peck on the cheek before pulling away. "I'm just exhausted," she would say with a sigh. Long day. The intimacy between us faded like a candle burning out. Jennifer had always been affectionate, always touching, always close. Now, she barely looked at me. The warmth in her eyes had been replaced by something I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Disinterest? One night, I decided to surprise her. I left work early, picked up her favorite takeout, and waited for her to come home. She was later than usual, and when she finally walked through the door, her reaction wasn't the one I expected. "Oh," she said, forcing a smile. "You didn't have to do this." She looked nervous, almost as if she had been caught doing something she shouldn't have. I studied her closely. Her makeup was perfect, her hair freshly styled. She smelled of expensive perfume, but not the one she usually wore. "Where were you?" I asked casually. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering. "I told you, I had drinks with the girls." Something in my gut twisted. "Which girls?" I pressed. Jennifer laughed, but it sounded forced. "You wouldn't know them. Some new coworkers." That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, a storm brewing in my mind. I hated the thoughts creeping into my head, but I couldn't ignore them anymore. The Jennifer I knew, the woman who had once been so devoted, was slipping away from me. And I had no idea why. I started paying closer attention. I noticed how she took her phone with her everywhere now, even into the bathroom. How she seemed to be texting constantly but never mentioned who it was. How she started dressing up more, even for simple errands. How she had a new energy about her, like she was excited about something or someone. Then, there were the calls. Late at night, when she thought I was asleep, she would slip out of bed, whispering into the phone in hushed tones. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off. "Just work stuff," she said. "Go back to sleep." But sleep was impossible now. My mind raced with questions, suspicions I didn't want to have. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Jennifer was slipping away from me, and I was powerless to stop it. Part 3. I had been wrestling with my suspicions for weeks, trying to convince myself that Jennifer was still the same woman I had fallen in love with. But doubt gnawed at me, a relentless force that refused to be silenced. I needed clarity. I needed proof. So when a last-minute business trip to Chicago came up, I saw an opportunity. I was supposed to be gone for 4 days, attending meetings, networking, sealing deals. But on the second day, as I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at my untouched dinner, I made a decision. I would return home early and surprise Jennifer. Maybe I was being irrational, letting my insecurities get the best of me. Maybe I would walk through the door and see her curled up on the couch, watching one of her favorite shows, waiting for me. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. The next morning, I booked the earliest flight back, my heart pounding as I imagined the look of joy on Jennifer's face when she saw me. To make the moment even more special, I stopped by her favorite flower shop and bought a bouquet of peonies, her absolute favorite. They were delicate, soft pink and white, just like the ones I had given her on our first anniversary. By the time I pulled into our driveway, exhaustion weighed heavy on me. My body ached from the flight, and my mind was clouded with worry. But as I stepped out of the car, flowers in hand, I took a deep breath, forcing a smile. This was a good thing. A romantic surprise. A reassurance for both of us. I unlocked the door quietly, wanting to catch her off guard. The house was silent, save for the faint hum of music coming from the kitchen. My heart swelled. Maybe she was making breakfast, thinking of me, missing me. I stepped forward, peonies clutched in my hands, eager to see her face. And then I heard it. A low moan. A whisper. Laughter. My feet froze. My breath hitched in my throat. I told myself I had misheard, that the exhaustion was playing tricks on me. But as I crept closer, the sounds became clearer, unmistakable. The clinking of glasses. The rustling of fabric. The deep, guttural sounds of pleasure that I had once believed were reserved only for me. I turned the corner, stepping into the kitchen. And there she was. Jennifer, naked, her body entwined with another man's. Her back arched against the counter, her fingers digging into his skin. Their bodies moved in sync, completely lost in each other, oblivious to the world around them. The bouquet of peonies slipped from my fingers, falling to the floor in a soft, pathetic heap. The sound of petals scattering across the tile barely registered in my mind. Everything felt distant, surreal, as if I were watching a movie in slow motion, detached from my own body. Jennifer gasped, her head snapping toward me. Her eyes widened in horror, her lips parting as if to say something, anything, but no words came out. The man, the neighbor, Ethan, turned as well, his face a mix of shock and guilt, though not nearly enough guilt for what he had done. For a long moment, none of us moved. None of us spoke. The air was thick with tension, the reality of the moment crashing down on us like an avalanche. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears, drowning out everything else. David, Jennifer finally breathed, scrambling to cover herself with a dish towel, as if that could erase what I had just seen. But I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want her excuses, her pathetic justifications. My world, the life we had built together, the love I had cherished, had been torn apart in an instant. I clenched my fists, my entire body trembling with rage, betrayal, heartbreak. I had imagined this moment before, in my worst nightmares, but nothing could have prepared me for the reality of it. Without a word, I turned and walked out. I could hear Jennifer calling after me, her voice breaking, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The peonies lay scattered on the floor, their delicate petals crushed beneath my footsteps as I left the home that no longer felt like mine. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind raced, replaying what I had just seen over and over again, tormenting me with images I would never be able to erase. My chest ached, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps as if I had been punched in the gut. Where was I supposed to go? What was I supposed to do? I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. I drove aimlessly for hours, my phone buzzing with messages from Jennifer. I didn't read them. I didn't care. The betrayal burned through me, leaving nothing but raw devastation in its wake. Finally, I pulled into a deserted parking lot, resting my head against the steering wheel. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make sense of the pain that was consuming me. Instead, I just sat there, staring into the darkness, knowing that my life, the life I had cherished, was over. Part 4. In the days following the betrayal, I barely spoke to Jennifer. I hadn't left the house, and I hadn't confronted her again. I let her sit in her own guilt, waiting to see if she would confess, waiting to see if she would take responsibility. She never did. She cried, she begged, she promised it was a mistake, a one-time thing. But I knew better. I had seen the way they moved together, the way she touched him, the way she had given herself to him so easily in our home, in our kitchen, the very place where we had once shared quiet mornings over coffee and stolen kisses. But I didn't react. I didn't scream. I didn't break things. I didn't throw her out. I played my part well, pretending to be the broken husband who just needed time to process everything. I told her I needed space, and she believed me. What she didn't know was that I had already begun my plan. Long before this nightmare began, I had installed surveillance cameras throughout the house. It wasn't because I distrusted her, at least. That's what I had told myself. It was for security, for peace of mind. But now, those cameras were my greatest weapon. That night, after she had gone to bed, I sat in my office and pulled up the footage from that day. My hands trembled as I pressed play, forcing myself to watch the scene unfold again. Every moan, every touch, every whispered word between them was burned into my memory. But this time, I wasn't watching as a heartbroken husband. I was watching as a man about to destroy the life of the woman who had destroyed mine. I saved the footage, backed it up in multiple locations, and then I waited. For the next few weeks, I watched Jennifer closely. At first, she acted as if she were remorseful. She tried to be affectionate, tried to spend more time with me, as if she could undo what had already been done. But then, when she realized I wasn't pushing for a divorce, when she thought she had gotten away with it, she slipped back into her old ways. She started staying out late again. She started dressing up more, laughing on the phone with someone she never named. And then, she made her biggest mistake. She brought Ethan back into our home. I was supposed to be out of town again, but I wasn't. I was sitting in my office, watching it all unfold on the cameras. She didn't just betray me. She flaunted it. That was all I needed. The next morning, I sent the footage to her boss. Jennifer worked for an upscale event planning company, one that prided itself on professionalism and reputation. I made sure to highlight the timestamps, how she had skipped work to meet with her lover, how she had brought him into our home on days she was supposedly working late. Within hours, she was called into the office. By the time she returned home, her face was pale, her eyes filled with panic. "They fired me," she whispered. "Someone sent them." She looked at me, realization dawning on her face. "You," she breathed. I didn't respond. I just stared at her, waiting for her to grasp the reality of what she had done, what she had lost. But I wasn't done yet. Next, I turned my attention to Ethan. I had dug into his life, his work, his connections. He wasn't just some harmless neighbor. He was a real estate agent, one who relied heavily on his reputation and word-of-mouth referrals. I sent the footage to his agency and to his biggest clients. By the end of the week, his name was smeared across the local real estate community. No one wanted to work with a man who screwed married women in their own homes while their husbands were away. His reputation was in shambles, and his business crumbled. Then, I filed for divorce. Jennifer was blindsided. She had convinced herself that I would eventually forgive her, that we would move past this. But I was never going to move past it. I was going to erase her from my life completely, and I was going to make sure she suffered every step of the way. She tried to fight it at first, but when I presented the footage to her attorney, there was nothing left to argue. The house? Mine. The assets? Split in my favor. She walked away with nothing but the clothes on her back. I watched as she packed her things, tears streaming down her face, begging me to reconsider. But I didn't say a word. She had made her choices, and now she was paying for them. Part 5. Jennifer had nowhere to go. After I destroyed her career, humiliated her, and left her with nothing in the divorce, she crawled back to the only people who might still pity her, her parents. I almost laughed when I found out she had moved back into her childhood bedroom, stripped of all the luxury she once flaunted. Gone were the designer clothes, the extravagant nights out, the lavish vacations. Now, she had nothing but the four walls of a room she hadn't lived in since she was a teenager. At first, they took her in, out of obligation more than love. But it didn't last. Word had spread. Friends, family, and even distant acquaintances had seen the evidence of her betrayal. The once admired daughter, the woman everyone believed had the perfect marriage, was now nothing but a disgraced adulteress. Her parents, deeply religious and concerned with their social standing, couldn't bear the shame she had brought upon them. It only took a few weeks before they, too, turned their backs on her. One night, she called me. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered, holding the phone to my ear in silence. "David, please." Her voice was small, broken, a shadow of the woman who once strutted around with confidence. "They kicked me out. I have nowhere to go." I let the silence hang between us for a moment, savoring her desperation. "Not my problem," I finally said, my voice as cold as steel. "I made a mistake," she sobbed. "I was stupid. I was selfish. But we were happy, weren't we? We were so good together before I ruined everything. David, please." I chuckled, the sound devoid of any warmth. "Yes, Jennifer. We were happy, until you spread your legs for another man in our kitchen." She gasped, but I wasn't done. "You made your choice, and now you get to live with it. You don't get to call me, begging for scraps of my life after you burned it all to the ground. Find someone else to save you." I ended the call. She tried reaching out a few more times, but I blocked her number. I wanted nothing to do with her. As for Ethan, he was already drowning. After his agency dropped him, his clients vanished, and his finances crumbled. His wife, the woman he had been separated from but not yet divorced, took full custody of their kids and ensured he paid dearly in court. Without a job, without connections, he spiraled into debt. Last I heard, he had left town, running away from the mess he had created. He thought he could take what was mine and walk away unscathed. But life had other plans. I wanted him to feel every ounce of pain I had suffered. So I took it further. I tracked down his family, his closest friends, and made sure they saw exactly who he was. I made sure every company he applied to knew about his moral failures. I crushed him, the way he had tried to crush me. And when he finally disappeared into nothingness, I felt nothing but satisfaction. And me? I thrived. For the first time in years, I felt free. The weight of lies, of betrayal, of wasted love was gone. I moved into a sleek new apartment overlooking the city, where I woke up every morning without the sick feeling of suspicion. I focused on myself, on my work, my health, my happiness. I traveled alone, rediscovering the joys of life without compromise. I went to restaurants where I had once dined with Jennifer, and this time, I enjoyed my meals without the bitterness of false smiles. Some nights, I wondered where she was, what she was doing. I imagined her wandering through cheap motels, sleeping in her car, desperately trying to scrape together whatever was left of her dignity. I didn't feel sorry for her. She had built her own hell, and now she had to live in it. Her friends abandoned her, one by one. No one wanted to be associated with the woman whose name was now synonymous with betrayal. The glamorous life she had once paraded around was now a distant memory. There was no new man to save her. No Ethan. No adoring husband. Just loneliness, the kind that eats away at a person, leaving only regret behind. And I reveled in it. People asked if I was bitter, if I hated her. No. Hate required effort, and Jennifer no longer deserved that from me. She was nothing. A ghost of a life I had left behind. I stood on the balcony of my new home, staring at the city lights, and I breathed in the cold night air. I had been through hell, but I had come out stronger. I was finally free, and I would never let anyone take that away from me again. The end.